Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak at this point as the bill progresses to the other place on some of the issues which will need to be addressed in the amendments that have been promised by the Secretary of State on protection for leaseholders. Issues on which there's clearly been today and for quite some time now strong cross-party concern, and I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Stevenage for the work that he's done on the issue, and indeed to the Father of the House for his contribution over a long period of time. But on both sides of the House there clearly is a consensus on what needs to be done, which was reflected in the debates this afternoon. And it's right that there should be, because we're seeking to address a glaring injustice facing leaseholders who are victims not just of developers, but as my friend, the member for Sheffield South East and Chair of the Select Committee pointed out, victims of regulatory failure for which we are responsible and successive governments have presided over. And I do think that it's unfortunate that we've been debating the bill so soon after the government's announcement last week, before the Secretary of State had the opportunity to table the amendments so that they could have received the scrutiny that they deserve. Now, I accept and agree that his statement last week was a step forward. Some of my constituents who've been affected met with him before the statement, and they shared the same view, that the narrative was good, the direction of travel felt right, but there remained too many unanswered questions. So I want to just briefly take the opportunity to set out the concerns that they have and that must be addressed in the government's amendments. Residents, for example, in Mandale House, who made an application to the Building Safety Fund, 80% of which, for cladding work, was rejected because on the issue that I think my friend, the Right Honourable Member for Leeds Central, suggested earlier, the juxtaposition of zinc and timber failed to meet the current criteria, leaving them facing bills of tens of thousands of pounds. In the Metis building, there's a problem with wooden balconies. Wicker Riverside, compartmentation. And it clearly affects many other buildings too, in my constituency and across the country. So we do need an absolute assurance that the statutory protection will cover all non-cladding remediation. Now, those in Mandale House also face a position where their developer is no longer in business. And we know this is a problem for hundreds of buildings. Companies failed or have been deliberately collapsed to avoid responsibility. So we need to be absolutely clear that those leaseholders will not be overlooked and that the government will provide them with full support in respect of all safety remediation costs. One of my constituents in the Millsands building asked for reassurance that support should be provided for leaseholders not in occupation of their flats. Again, as my honourable friend, the Right Honourable Member for Leeds Central pointed out, many have been forced to leave to raise funds to address the bills that are being demanded of them. Others have left as their families have grown, and they've done a sensible thing. They've moved on and they've used the rental income from the property to fund their new house. For some, it was an investment, a use of a lump sum to provide a retirement income in a solitary flat. Now, as the Honourable Member for Hemel Hempstead argued earlier, these people are victims too, and so they need to be fully supported. And we need a statement now to send a clear message to freeholders and developers that they mustn't rush to carry out work to avoid their responsibilities by imposing costs on leaseholders now before protection becomes in legislation. And there's another issue too faced by constituents I have in Wicker Riverside, a building which was evacuated just before Christmas 2020 because of fire safety concerns, and they have a problem with insurance, not that of rising costs on which other members commented earlier and for which there should be compensation, but no insurance company will provide cover for their building. They have been uninsurable for more than a year now, and it's an untenable position which the government must act and could act to address. And it's something I've discussed with ministers. Finally, there's an overriding concern of how long the process proposed by the government will take as legal action drags on with resistance from developers and others who the developers might hold accountable, and litigation, endless litigation. Rather than solve the problem, there's a risk that it will be prolonged for a very long time indeed. So if the government is confident that money can be recovered from developers, it could and should simply act to fix all the faults now and then use the full resources of the state to recover the money from those responsible, so that, as members on both sides have said throughout today's discussion, no costs fall on those who have no responsibility for the predicament that they're in.